Greetings. I'm Glen Alex, your host of The Glen Alex Show, live on the Bold Brave TV network. Each episode of The Glen Alex Show focuses on a different aspect of health because my life's work is about total health. And I am on a mission to help you be joyful, connected, confident, and complete the life experience we call wealth, WELLTH, which is health plus other riches. And today's episode is about something that we all experience: stress. So please help me welcome Jenny Lytle to the Glen Alex Show. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, thank you so much, Glenn. It's great to be here.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for making time. So, could you take a minute and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, like you said, I'm Jenny Lytle, and I am a stress relief and self care coach and a registered nurse. And I've been a nurse for 28 years now, and been coaching for about 5 years. And I'm just really passionate about helping, particularly women and caregivers, but everyone with their stress and self care, because stress is such a pervasive thing anymore, and it affects every area of our lives.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So, what led you into this area of life, of health?
Well, I had worked for, I've had 16 years of hospice nursing experience, and, working in end of life care and being around people who are terminally ill and their caregivers. Of course, that's a very high stress
Mhm.
situation. And I found myself feeling some of that extra stress because of a variety of reasons. One of the biggest ones being a lack of boundaries. But in my own journey, finding that I really wasn't. I wasn't taking care of myself because I was so busy focusing on everyone else. And so that kind of led me down a path to compassion fatigue and some burnout. And then through my own journey, I discovered that I really love working with people to help them, prevent some of the things that I've gone through. And if not prevent, then help them to, be able to recover from that a little more quickly than my own journey.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're doing this work because you're right. It affects everyone and it is very much needed. So, before we get into the elements of stress, can you just define it for us? I've talked to people who will down a bag of potato chips while they're complaining about their job and at the same time saying they have no stress. So, can you define what stress is?
Sure. Well, stress is something that we all face. And when we think stress, we think of it as being something negative. And, the reality is stress is just that it's just our body's reaction to external pressures. And some of those things can be good and can be positive. And, if we're being chased by something, then we want to be able to run. We want to be able to react quickly. But it's those day to day pressures that start to impact us negatively when we aren't taking time to kind of decompress a bit from that. And there is something, I just recently finished a neuroscience course. And one of the things that I found really interesting is there was a study done that showed that our perception of stress is something that really impacts our health too. So if we feel like stress is going to negatively impact us, then it's going to, and we're more likely to actually die from that than if we're just like, okay, stress is just kind of a part of life, and so now I need to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, perception is huge in mental and overall health. And I'm glad you mentioned that there is positive stress. So, for most people getting married or graduating, that's a positive, stressful situation, even though there is that external demand and challenges placed on you.
Hmm.
It's a positive event, but you still feel stressed out. So,
Hmm.
yes, there is the positive and the negative stress. So, thank you for clarifying what stress is, and I hope the person eating the bag of potato chips recognizes when they're under stress.
Exactly.
So, what are some of the negative effects or just effects in general of uncontrolled stress,
Okay. Well,
unmanaged
for
stress.
yeah, so one of those is things like eating a bag of potato chips. And there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways to cope with anything. And so, you know, just being able to kind of look at how we naturally gravitate toward things. For some of us, maybe it's eating too much or sleeping too much.
Mhm.
Or maybe over exercising or drinking to excess. But for others, maybe it's okay, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Being able to know yourself personally and realize, are you doing something because you're trying to avoid maybe the things that you really need to be dealing with?
Mhm.
Or is it something that's negatively impacting you? So let's say your eating or your drinking habits. If that's starting to negatively affect you and you still aren't making changes, then it's probably time to really take a look at that and evaluate what you need to do differently.
Okay. Okay. Now, speaking of the person downing the bag of potato chips, I, and the people that I work with, they tend to not understand that stress is relative. So there's a different type of stress for a corporate executive, for a heart surgeon, for a teacher, and for a cashier,
Mm-hmm.
though there's still stress in their lives. So can you speak to that? Just it's all relative, though we all experience some level of stress.
Absolutely. It's, what may be very stressful for me it may be something that you just kind of take in stride. And so part of that is, like you said, so much of that is relative. It's that perceived stress that really has an impact on us. And it's also cumulative. So if you have one kind of big stressor going on, so let's say you're getting married, and so you've got that going, and yes, it's positive, but still there's a lot that's going on with that. And then if at the same time you're starting a new job or having a baby, then all of those things together, even though they're all good, they can take a lot out of you. So
Yes.
recognizing that it's not just one thing, but it's often a combination of those things. And then just kind of letting go of the judgment that we can have sometimes when we don't understand why somebody over here maybe isn't doesn't seem to be affected by the things that are really
Right.
troubling us. And then
Right.
that gets into that whole downward spiral.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because I want to talk more about that when we come back. It's time for
Sure.
a short break. And when Jenny and I return, we will talk more about how stress affects your health. So I'm Glen Alex, and this is the Glen Alex Show on the Bold Brave TV network. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Glen Alex Show. Hi, I'm Glen Alex, your host, live on the Bold Brave TV network. And we are here with Jenny Lytle, nurse and stress relief and self care coach, talking about how stress impacts your health. And we left the first segment with Jenny talking about the relativity of stress, how different people experience and perceive stress. So, Jenny, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so in particular. But really, if I was going to add something, I guess yes, I am. So just to just to have that compassion with ourselves. We can be so hard on ourselves. And so the way that I try to think of it is, when we're kind of feeling down on ourselves for a perceived failure or flaw, think about the way that you would talk to a good friend who was going through the same circumstances. And chances are you would talk to them much differently than the way you're talking to yourself.
Yes, yes, you would. And that brings me to internal stressors. You had mentioned in your definition that stress is like external challenges that we're required to meet, but we also have internal stressors, that pressure that we put on ourselves to be
Mm,
perfect, to do it right, to not make a mistake, to please everybody. That also causes a lot of stress because that is unrealistic thinking. Do you run
absolutely.
into that?
Yes, and definitely because we see, and I think social media, that's something that I'm not
Mm,
anti-social media, but it can make that more of a challenge for us because we generally see people's highlight reels, and and then we feel like we aren't quite measuring up to
mhm.
the things that other people are doing. They seem to have the perfect kids who are who always are behaving, and they capture these great moments with them. And we know that our own kids are like screaming, and things are a battle a lot of the time, or our house is a mess. And so we have this this pressure that we put on ourselves to measure up, and
Mhm.
often we're trying to measure up to just a totally unrealistic ideal. And we have those good moments too, but that's not what we see or we focus on. Instead, we think of all of the ways that we're failing. And uh, for the most part, it's just being human.
Mhm.
But and sometimes it can be things from years before. Maybe it's expectations that our parents had on us, or that teachers, things that teachers said when we were younger, and we can kind of carry over some of that. And so I just, I challenge my clients to think about where they are now and what they want now. And our life circumstances change. So we need
Yes.
to adjust our expectations too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm curious though. I worked in hospice too, and I worked in an inpatient setting and then in the patient's homes. And in the inpatient settings, even though it was just a high stress situation, I found the environment very calm, very peaceful. The staff was very loving, very soft spoken, and it was a welcoming environment. So I'm curious, what issues did you find in the hospice setting?
It's funny that you said that because I didn't realize that you had worked in hospice as well, and I just recently had done my first inpatient hospice contract. And yes, I found those things to be true there as well for the most part. But I loved home hospice. There's just something so incredible about being in someone's like personal space. I mean, it's
Hmm.
to me, it's like it's a sacred. It's such a privilege to be able to meet people where they are in such a difficult time of their life. And I felt like it was such a privilege to be able to come alongside them. But the thing that I found is so many caregivers and so many patients just have these unrealistic expectations of themselves too.
Hmm.
Um, and to be perfect, or to not be a burden, or to know all of the answers. And that's just I mean, most of us don't go through a lot of hospice experiences, as
Right.
family members. And so just having that grace with themselves, and recognizing that they don't have to do it all alone. That's what the hospice team is there for, and trying to get some other people involved as well.
Exactly, exactly. So in trying to not be a burden and be perfect and measure up to some unrealistic ideal, did you find that the family members and even clients just are pretty poor at self care?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because and I think as women in particular, we we're caregivers. I mean, we're, just kind of naturally nurturing, or that's the expectation. Some of that, it comes
Mhm.
naturally to some of us more than others. But and we feel like if we're not taking care of others, then somehow we're failing. But
Mhm.
we forget that, like, taking care of ourselves, that's not being selfish. We have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to continue to show up for all of those people that we want to care for. And it's, I think it's something that's seen as, okay, when I get done with all of these other things, then I'll finally take time
And
for
I'll have
myself.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. Well, there's a reason that the airlines tell you if there's an emergency, put your oxygen mask on first before you try to help somebody else. So,
Absolutely.
okay. Well, we'll leave it right there because it's time for another short break. Um, when we return, Jenny and I will get back into how you can stress less. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Glen Alex, and this is the Glen Alex Show on the Bold Brave TV network. Here with Jenny Lytle, stress relief and self care coach. And we're talking about how stress, uncontrolled, unmanaged stress, can affect your health. We left off the previous segment talking about how caregivers just won't take care of themselves first because they don't want to take time away from the patient. They are looking at something perfect, some unrealistic ideal in their caregiving that keeps them from taking care of self. So, Jenny, let's look at healthy selfishness. I mean, again, the airlines will tell you put your oxygen mask on first before you try to assist anyone else, even if it is a child next to you. So, there is something to taking care of self first, or at least along with your caregiving of someone else.
Absolutely. And, I think that really is something that we're starting to understand a little bit more, but we're still kind of resistant to it because, like you said, especially when you're talking about a child or someone who is very dependent on you, it can feel kind of counterintuitive, but it absolutely makes sense. If we're not able to function on our own, if we're not able to keep our own stress under control and be
Mm-hmm.
the happy, healthy, stress, like we talked a bit about before, it negatively impacts us in every area of our life. And so we can plow through to a certain extent, but then it starts really weighing on us and we're not going to be able to be the caregivers that we want to be.
Exactly. And what I often tell clients is if your cup is empty, you have nothing to give. So if you think of nothing else and just think of it as refreshing, replenishing what you have to give to others. So that, and for me, stress management and self care does require healthy boundaries.
Ah, oh, boundaries. Yes.
So you
And
had
one of the
mentioned,
biggest ones is learning to say no, and
yes.
to do that unapologetically. But even if you have to apologize at first, while you're kind of building your no muscle, just being able to say no to things, because I know I am somebody that ideally I want to do everything and I want to do it all right now, but
Mhm.
but that's not realistic. And so when you say yes to some things, then that means you're going to be saying no to other things. And
Yes.
so, learning to say no to the things that maybe are good things, but they may not be the best things, or they may not be good for you in this particular season. And that's something that so many of us have trouble with. We don't want to let people down.
Exactly. And we don't want to risk people not liking us or not
Mm-hmm.
approving of us and that kind of thing, even if the no is appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, boundaries are also about not putting yourself in a position to have to say yes or no. So saying no, yes, is important, but your
Mm-hmm.
positioning in relation to the situation, to the person, is just as important for me in self care and managing your stress. I have a client who her favorite word is overwhelmed because she doesn't say no.
Ah.
And she continues to let more pile on because she doesn't want to lose their love. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you're not going to lose their love. You're going to gain their respect.
Right. Right. And I've definitely been there myself with that, where, I felt like, well, somebody has to do it. But and every time it was me, because everybody else was able to say no, and they knew that
Right.
it wasn't healthy to be a doormat. But I really struggled with that for years.
How did you figure it out? How did you work through that?
Um, I got to a point where I was miserable. I was miserable. My job was not fulfilling anymore.
Okay.
I realized that my family that I had put on the back burner for a long time. I had started working in hospice when my kids were in preschool, and I felt like I had all of this time with them. And when I got to this point, I realized they were getting ready to graduate from high school, and that I had
Wow.
lost a lot of time. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And so that was a rude awakening.
Okay. Wow. Sorry you went through that, though. I'm very glad that you worked through it and learned from it.
Right. Me too. And, I mean, there's a lot of things that, that I regret. I wish I would have done some things quicker and differently, but, it's all worked out. So
Yes.
I'm so passionate about helping others avoid those kind of things, because it's, time passes quickly.
It does, and it does diminish your quality of life because you experience burnout, you missed out on family. Sometimes other types of relationships suffer. What are some of the other symptoms of stress out of control that you deal with your clients?
Okay. Yeah. So definitely, the things that you described, but a lot of physical things too, so maybe it's some increased anxiety,
Hmm.
some issues with sleeping, either too much or not enough. If you're having trouble sleeping, and that's kind of a new thing for you, then those are kind of red flags. Things like high blood pressure or overeating. um, when things get really bad, you may be looking at migraines, or just,
Hmm.
having a lot of tension, a lot of, um, just irritability, and just that kind of general feeling of unease. You may notice that your things that you've cared about before, you're not really caring about them as much anymore, or you find yourself just really, kind of taking shortcuts
Hmm.
on things that you wouldn't normally, whether it's, in your personal life or in your work life. You start cutting corners because you just get that spiral where you feel like things are out of control and you've got to do something.
Absolutely. And I will add to that long list of negative health effects from uncontrolled stress is I have digestive issues. And so
Mm,
one of the things I at the forefront of my mind is managing my stress levels. When I get too wound up, too worried, or it'll show up in my how I metabolize food, either or I don't
yes.
metabolize food. So stress is real, people, and it can affect every area of your life, every area of your health. So we are here to encourage you to do something about it. And I would love for you to reach out to Jenny for some more for tips and guidance. So, with that, it's time to take another quick break. When we come back, Jenny and I will have more on how you can stress less. I'm Glen Alex, and this is The Glen Alex Show, live on the Bold Brave TV network. So, stay tuned, and we will be right back. Welcome back. I'm your host, Glen Alex, and this is The Glen Alex Show, live on the Bold Brave TV network. And I am here with Jenny Lytle, stress relief and self care coach. And we are talking about how stress can impact your health. And we are hoping that you're learning from what Jenny is sharing, from what we're both sharing, so you can manage stress in such a way that you can live your best life like Jenny is now. And in the next segment, we are going to take your calls 866 451 1451, 866 451 1451. So, Jenny, in this segment, I want to get into your tips for managing stress. What do you got for
Okay.
us?
All right. Well, I my approach is very customized, because what is relaxing to me, what's something that, really kind of mellows me out and or, hypes me up in a good way, it can be very different from maybe something that you enjoy. So,
Mhm.
I joke that, stress relief and self-care is more than beach vacations and massages. And, for you, maybe it's riding a four-wheeler through the mud. But
No.
me neither. I don't know why I use that as an example, but I've never done that. But some people, that's their thing. And so it's really looking at, thinking about what is it that I'm doing when I just think, this is what I needed. And for me, I love to be out in nature.
Mm.
Some people that may not be their thing, and that's okay. But it's, instead of looking at, what do I need to do for stress relief, what kind of things, there's certain things that are helpful, like
Mhm.
physical activity. Some sort of physical activity is good. And that may be going to the gym, that may be going for a leisurely walk. So it's figuring out, do you really like, fast-paced dancing? Is that something that's relaxing for you, or is it more yoga? And
Yes.
that may vary depending on what's going on with you too.
So
So
let me just
sure.
interject here and add that physical activity not only burns unwanted calories, it burns off that negative excess energy, which is
Mhm.
why it has a relaxing effect. And physical activity can help you sleep better. So it's
Mhm.
kind of a crazy cycle that we can get into. If we're not active, we can't sleep, or we're not sleeping because we're not active.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And when we have all of that, all of that stress built up, then it messes with our cortisol levels. and
Hmm.
and we get those kind of calming hormones when we're working out, especially if we're putting forth a little bit of effort with that. And so, that, and looking at the things that you're eating. And again, that doesn't mean you can't ever have chips, but a bag of chips probably isn't a great idea. And it's not going to, maybe it's going to make you feel good in the moment, but that's not going to really support you feeling your best and you being able to, cope with stress really well.
Right.
Instead, you want to look at more natural foods, more whole foods, more things that are food. And regardless of what kind of diet plan you follow, I mean, you may be, gluten free or keto or vegetarian, but what real food is versus junk food.
Right.
And I think we all kind of, we inherently know that, and just in finding some balance with that too. It doesn't have to be all good all the time, but you want to be probably 80-90% good foods, and then have room for a little bit of treats or a little slip here and there. But things that are going to support you well, when it comes to managing stress and just overall feeling good.
Okay. Physical activity, nutrition,
Uh-huh. Sleep.
boundaries, sleep.
Boundaries. Yes, yes.
Yes,
Sleep is so
sleep.
huge. And we've touched on it because it does overlap with everything. If we're having a bunch of caffeine in the afternoon, then we may not be able to sleep well. The same if we're not getting much exercise, we're probably not going to be able to sleep well. But just the buildup of stress and the constant thoughts that are going through our heads all the time, those are things that absolutely can impact our sleep too. And things as simple as our habits, being on the computer, being on our phones, just having
Hmm.
that constant, the constant blue light and the constant stimulation
Yes.
can make sleep very difficult. So, doing some simple things like trying to avoid that, an hour or two or three before bed, or at least
Yes.
minimize that. And things like journaling can be very helpful too, just to kind of, get some of that stuff out of you. And
Hmm.
if you're somebody that worries about, what if somebody finds it, tear it up. You can throw it away when you're done. Just the act of writing it, especially if you write by hand, is very therapeutic.
Yes. Yes. I like to recommend that clients who have trouble with sleep do the mind dump with a journal as the last thing they do before they lay down or turn off the light to
Mm-hmm.
go to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
because that helps empty the mind, as you say, and get that empty chatter out.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And I
So
like
what?
doing that with a list, when I'm trying
Okay.
to, remember things, or, what if I
Right.
forget this, just get it all out on paper.
Just get it out on paper.
Mhm.
So what about laughter?
Ah, laughter. They say it's the best medicine for a reason. It really is. There really is. There's research that backs that up too. It's not just something that's said, but there is it stressful situations. A lot of times we don't want to laugh, and there's times when if you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so, and sometimes even both. But just there's generally something joyous you can find in every situation if you look for it. And and being able to take those little timeouts, and if it's laughing with a friend or watching a funny video, those are things that can help to just to help kind of decrease some of that stress and do it quickly.
Yes. Laughter is great medicine, as we found out during the commercial breaks.
For sure.
So even if you uh, don't want to laugh at your situation, you can find something funny. There are these memes all over the place. There are
Ugh,
movies, TV shows that are comedies. So try to find something to generate laughter. So
yes.
we're going to take another short break, and when we come back, um, please call in. Give the engineer Justin your questions, and he will relay them to me as we work out tech difficulties. Dial 866-451-1451. 866-451-1451. I'm Glen Alex. This is the Glen Alex Show on the Bold Brave TV network. So stay tuned, and we'll be back to speak with you. Welcome back. I'm Glen Alex, and you are watching The Glen Alex Show live on the Bold Brave TV network. Here with Jenny Lytle, stress relief and self care coach, talking about how stress impacts your health. So, Jenny gave us some tips about how to manage stress and how stress can negatively impact your health. So, this segment, we're open to answer your questions about stress management and self care. So, please call in 866 451 1451, 866 451 1451 with your questions, and we're here to answer them for you. And while callers are calling in and getting connected, Jenny, what is a typical question you are asked about stress?
Mm. Um, how can I avoid stress? And
Oh,
and the
that's a
answer to
good
that
one.
is, yeah, you can't. Um, so that's bad news there. But the thing is, we all deal with stress. Um, well, we all face stress. Some of us deal with it in a positive way, and some of
Yes.
us, try to avoid it or try to run from it. But when we accept that stress is just a part of life, and that it doesn't have to negatively impact us, but we do need to be aware of what it is that maybe makes us feel a little more uncomfortable, and then what we can do to decrease our stress levels. When we feel that starting to creep up, we can come up with an action plan for what that looks like. And so one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to um, come up with things that they enjoy doing, things that make them feel good. Because when you're really stressed out, you don't want to try to come up with, well, what should I do now to start feeling less stressed?
And you may not be able to at that time.
Right, right. You don't have the time, you just don't have the capacity to do that. When your frustration levels are high, you're not thinking clearly. So one of the things that I encourage is, ahead of time, just, in some downtime, start jotting down some things that are enjoyable for you, things that make you feel less stressed, that make you feel more cared for. And then you'll have those that you can keep handy. And when you've got 2 minutes or 10 minutes, then you know what you can do that's going to help with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, do you help clients identify what their triggers of stress are so they can be
Yes.
aware and catch it earlier in the onset?
Yes. Absolutely, because for a lot of people, it's when we kind of get in that cycle. So if you're not sleeping well, then you're going to be more prone to um, being more irritable, and your stress
Hmm.
levels are going to be higher, which then of course can impact your sleeping again and can impact your interactions with people. And so it's that vicious cycle. And so realizing, okay, what have I eaten, how have I been sleeping, um,
Hmm.
when's the last time I got some sort of movement in my life, when have I had a break, especially if we're talking about caregivers. Has there been any time that I've been able to be away from my loved one? And that's parents, that's caregivers who are caring for someone who is ill. um, we all need breaks. And so taking a look at those things and figuring out what's making us feel worse, then we can start working backwards and figure out how to avoid some of that to begin with.
For sure, especially the unnecessary stressors, like not saying no and having too much on your
Mm-hmm.
plate. That's going to trigger your stress, or being around someone who is abusive, that can trigger your stress as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. So, thank you for that. Now, you have a workbook, 7 Days to Stress Less.
Yes.
Tell us about
Yes.
that.
Sure. So I just recently developed this guide. It's kind of an expanded version of something else that I had done, but it kind of walks you through some of the things that we've talked about. So looking at first of all, yes, you can be less stressed, but
Yes.
it may take some effort. And so looking at where you are now, and then where do you want to go, and then coming up with a plan for how you're going to get there. And so starting off with, we can often kind of overgeneralize, like my life is just a mess,
Yes.
or everything is great. And
Everything.
yeah, it's one or the other. There's no, well, some of it's good, some of it's bad, but that really is the way it is. Very frequently there's a couple of areas that are going really well, and there's a couple of areas that are not going so well. But when we take a look at those things and really assess that, then that helps us to see where we can focus to get the most impact.
Okay.
And so if we know that we're having an issue with our career, but all of the other areas of our life are going pretty well, then maybe there are some things that we're doing in other areas of our life that can kind of transfer over into our career a little bit.
Okay,
um,
and the guy does walk through different areas of
yes.
life,
Yes.
family, work,
Hmm. Hmm.
finances. So I like it. It's pretty thorough. And what I also like about your guide is um, you just you narrow it down to three things. Where are you?
Hmm.
Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get there?
Hmm.
Too often people don't want to acknowledge where they are, but they always want to be somewhere else. And
Yes.
that you can't you're not going to get there with that jump. So I
Right.
like the way you laid that out.
Well, thank you. It's kind of, it's like a GPS. When you get in your car and you set, if you want to go to California, well, you have to know where you are, because if you're in New York, then that's going to be, your path is going to be different than if you're in Florida.
Right.
So you have to know where you are before you can figure out the best way to get to where you're wanting to go.
Absolutely. And presence, being present, is one of the things I teach about anxiety and stress and overwhelm. Is people are too far into the future or too
Hmm.
far into the past, and we can't control either. So
Right.
that's why it was so impressive to me that you started with, where are you? Where are you right now? And you're
Hmm.
right. You can only start where you are. You can't start where you want to be.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, And then I just kind of go into, being able to develop that plan for yourself. So kind of like we talked a bit about, what is it that you enjoy? What is stress relieving for you? And getting that all put in place where you're able to then refer to it later. So
Okay.
it's very action oriented.
Okay. Yes, it is. And change only happens with action, not with thought. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So when we come back from the last short break, you can tell everyone how they can get your guide. I'm Glen Alex, and this is the Glen Alex Show live on the Bold Brave TV network. Stay tuned. We are back. I'm Glen Alex, your host of The Glen Alex Show, live on the Bold Brave TV network, here with Jenny Lytle, stress relief and self care coach. And we've had a fascinating conversation about stress and how uncontrolled stress can negatively impact your health. Jenny shared her wisdom about stress, some tips on how to manage it, and what to look for. And so, Jenny, you left off talking about your guide, 7 steps, 7 days to stress less. So, if you can sum up your approach to stress, and what nugget, what takeaway do you want viewers to have today?
Okay, sure. I would say that overall, my approach is let go of the shoulds and the right way of decreasing your stress, and instead just go inward and take a look at what it is that really makes you feel good. And there's no right or wrong to that. You're the only one who knows it.
Mhm.
But it's also possible that you don't know it because you haven't just taken the time to sort through that a little bit. So take the time. You're worth it. You need that, and you're going to be able to show up so much better for for yourself, for your family, for all of those people that you care about. If you just put in that little bit of time and effort to take care of yourself.
Okay, that's awesome stuff. Thank you. Now, if someone has a question or wants a consultation, how can they contact you?
So you can go to my website, which is jennylytle.com. And there's a contact me button. There's a work with me. I do a free consultation with everyone, and I'm happy to connect in that way. And I'm also on social media. For the most part, I'm Jenny Lytle or Jenny Lytle RN on Instagram, and Becoming Your Best with Jenny Lytle RN on Facebook.
Okay. And your guide, 7 days to stress less, is available on your website as well.
Absolutely. And yes,
Okay.
you can go directly to that by going to jennylytle.com/guide.
Okay, fantastic. Jenny, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and for sharing your personal experiences with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity, Glenn. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Oh, you're very welcome. You take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And we really hope that you understand that stress is a normal part of life because of challenges that are natural to the human existence. So it's not weakness. There's no shame in experiencing stress, acknowledging stress, or even getting help to help you manage your stress. Because, you can live your best life by taking this challenge on, working through it, and growing through it. Because after all, my mission for you is to be joyful, connected, confident, and complete. The life experience we call wealth, WELLTH, which is health plus other riches. And for more information about my work in total health, please visit glenalex.com. Tune in next week for more on your health. I'm Glen Alex, and until next time, be well.
Joyful